Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. And before we get into the topic of today's video, we have to give a couple of announcements here. The first thing I'd like to bring to your attention is the existence of Quarter, which is my own open source alt-tech alternative to YouTube, as well as an alternative to lying grifter sites like BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. Quarter is a video sharing site whose features and functionality are rivaled only by YouTube. It offers everything you'd want in a video sharing site, such as full 1080p HD video uploads. You have live streaming that's really high quality. You have free restreaming. You have comment sections that are easy to manage. You have public playlists. And you even have some features that you don't see on YouTube, like an insight currency called Quarter Bucks that you earn by getting views on your videos. And once you get enough Quarter Bucks, you can use them to promote individual videos or your entire channel on the main page of the website. There's also video chat rooms that you can create where you can not only do video calls with friends, family, coworkers, your own followers, etc., but you can also live stream to your channel from these chat rooms as well. So if you're looking for an open source alt-tech alternative to YouTube that not only champions freedom of speech in practice as well as word, but also has the full features and functionality that you would want in a video site, Quarter is the site for you, and you should join Quarter today. The other thing I'd like to announce is the existence of my new book, Hanover, which is an original superhero novel that has been published by Worldview Press. This book came out almost 2 weeks ago, roughly 2 weeks ago by the time you're watching this video, and it is an incredibly powerful and entertaining book. It's basically like a modern-day version of Samson mixed into the coronavirus authoritarian world that we found ourselves in 2021, only that world never ceased, and it actually got worse over time because the story takes place in the year 2025. Currently, the book is available on Amazon and my Teespring store, but hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to list the book on other websites as well. Links to those other sites' listings will be on this page in the future. So now that you know about Quarter, and now that you know about my new book, Hanover, let's talk about the subject of today's video, which is this article provided by the Daily Star titled, Metaverse Children to Replace Real Kids by 2050 and Help with Overpopulation. The subtitle says, an AI expert has predicted that virtual children will become the norm in the next 50 years. You'll be able to raise them in the metaverse without having to change a single nappy. Well, gee, wouldn't that be convenient? Not just for people who don't want to deal with the stress of being a real parent raising a real child, but also convenient for the globalists who want to reduce the population of the world to 500 million people. If people are having metaverse children instead of real ones, well, you'll see a decline in the population of the world over time. The article reads, virtual kids born in the metaverse could become more common in the next 50 years, according to an AI expert. Author Catriona Campbell believes parents will want to care for digital children in virtual reality using a headset to feel like they're really there with a CGI kid. These virtual kids would just be like the real thing, but could be switched off at the touch of a button, and Campbell argues they'll help the world deal with overpopulation. In a book released this year, Campbell says a Tamagotchi generation will be born and be available to parents for a small monthly fee. Well, gee, wouldn't that be great? Virtual children that are just like the real thing, but if you get overwhelmed trying to care for them in your little virtual world through your little virtual headset, you can just press a button and the kids turn off and you can just relax and de-stress and get your head in the right place. And then you can press that same button, the child turns back on, and you get back to parenting your CGI kid. And if this catches on and becomes a thing, well, no duh will this deal with overpopulation. People will be forsaking real children for these digital ones because of the convenience that it provides. The article continues. In the book, she says, virtual children may seem like a giant leap from where we are now, but within 50 years, technology will have advanced to such an extent that babies which exist in the metaverse are indistinct from those in the real world. She adds, we're already well on our way to create the Tamagotchi generation, which for all intents and purposes will be real to their parents. On the basis that consumer demand is there, which I think it will be, AI children will become widely available for a relatively small monthly fee. Now, this whole scenario actually kind of reminds me of the 2009 movie called Surrogates that starred Bruce Willis. And basically, in the surrogate story, what happened is that these robots were created that people could literally lay in a bed, put on a headset, and they could live their lives through these robots. And so they could make themselves look however they want, do whatever they want to do. And basically these robots became so widespread that virtually every single person walking around in the real world, with a few exceptions, was a robot instead of a real person. And what this movie did a good job of exploring is the psychological impact this had on people. When they would be walking around in the real world through their robot surrogates and they'd see an actual flesh and blood human out there with them, they would look down their nose at them. They would condemn them for daring to be out there in the flesh and blood. They would even call them insulting terms like meatbag. And if this kind of thing with metaverse children ever caught on, I think one of the things that would happen is that human beings would actually become psychologically damaged and deranged, and they would start looking down on flesh and blood kids. They basically will dehumanize flesh and blood people, flesh and blood kids, and eventually this will happen to all aspects of human life, because you'll start doing everything in the metaverse. You'll have your job in the metaverse. You have your family in the metaverse. You have your children in the metaverse. You have all your stuff that you do in the metaverse. The real world will just become a major drag and inconvenience once you get addicted to living a completely different life inside the metaverse. Now, what does the rest of the article point out? The idea that the world will become dangerously overpopulated is not supported by data. Although the global population is set to continue increasing over the next century, it is due to eventually flatten and slow down. This is already happening in countries in the West, including Britain, which have aging populations and declining birth rates. In the UK, that means the population is set to decline by 2025 and begin shrinking, which will lead to many unfilled jobs. Population growth tends to slow in post-industrial societies as contraception becomes more readily available and more women enter the workforce. One estimate suggests you could fit the entirety of the world's population in an area the size of Los Angeles, although it would obviously not be very comfortable. Put simply, it's unlikely that virtual children will replace the real deal anytime soon. Now, that does sound like a sensible read of the situation, and I would tend to agree with the Daily Star's ending analysis of this whole thing. It is true that you can fit the entire population of the world in Los Angeles or in Texas or in Florida or places like that. There's actually way more space and resources in the world than the globalists would like you to believe. The problem, though, is that people are being gaslit into stuff like the metaverse. And yes, the metaverse currently seems like a dying project because the amount of people that are on it right now are not nearly as many as there were when the metaverse first rolled out and when people first started using it. But I have no doubt whatsoever that a better, improved version of the thing will come around and people will get addicted to it. After all, if you've seen the Matrix movies, you know that this is exactly what happened in that franchise. When we saw Neo talking to the architect revealed that the version of the Matrix that they were all in was, I think, the 6th version of it. That there were 5 different versions of the Matrix before, and basically each one was inferior to the current one, and so every time the one version of the Matrix would fail, they would try to improve upon it in the next version. And so by the time you get to the movie franchise and the 6th version of the Matrix that they're in, things have been, for the most part, pretty much perfected. So I think the same thing will happen here if the metaverse in the real world. I think even though the metaverse right now seems to be a dying project, I think the globalists will go back to the workshop and they'll retool the metaverse, and they'll eventually create new versions of it that are actually fun to be in, and it'll get people addicted to it, and eventually this whole thing could become a reality in the next 50 years of people living lives in a virtual world and having children in a virtual world and families in a virtual world and doing everything in the virtual world and just leaving the real world to rot and let the globalists do whatever they want with the real world. I think that's all going to happen. When exactly that happens, well, only God knows. But seems to me at this point that this is eventually going to happen. It's just what happens when human beings reject God and rebel against God long enough and hard enough, and they have to replace him with something. And so it seems like this would be as good a thing as any to replace God's commands and decrees with.